Bene.
Good morning to everyone and welcome. His Excellency, good morning. So this is a long-awaited day, and by way of coincidence, this is also the anniversary of the death of Sister Dorothy Sang of the Congregation of Notre Dame of Namur, who was killed in 2005 for her activity protecting smallholders in the Amazon and their families. It's a good thing to remember her with the presentation of this papal document, Querida Amazonia, that words I'm sure were also close to her heart. The Holy Father has followed the words that had been said at the end of the last General Congregation, offering a word of his magisterium on how we experience the Synod, in whose light to reconsider, review the synodal process as a whole and the final document more specifically. This he offered in the form of an apostolic exhortation, Querida Amazonia, according to the timings that had been set, because the current text had been handed over at the end of December last year. And we, in giving the journalists this document early this morning, we tried to give you some time to get to know the document in order to promote the contemplative dimension, as Pope Francis calls it, making it possible to understand the text. And in the future, we will try to do even better in this sense. The Pope himself considered the 4 dimensions of the Synod, which he had identified during the first General Assembly: the social, the ecological, the cultural, and the pastoral ones, that embraces all of them. And he did so in a poetic dimension, perhaps original, that draws inspiration also from the work of the peoples of the Amazon and those who have written about it, in the awareness that poets, prophetic and contemplatives, as he writes, express in the best way the pain and the love for the earth and their peoples. Poetry and dreams, though, are not something abstract, because the document itself which we are presenting presents with great concreteness a number of indications for the life of the Church, as you have had the chance of reading over the past few hours with this document under embargo. This document is also the result of a long path that clearly has not been completed, is not finished, and that we should refer to today. And I would like to ask His Eminence Cardinal Baldisseri to help us trace it out, because he followed it right from the start. Thank you, Your Eminence. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. At the Angelus of 15th October 2017, Pope Francis convened a special assembly for the Pan-Amazonian region on the theme Amazonia, New Paths for the Church and for an Integral Ecology. And from that moment on, a synodal process began, which continued for 2 years, during which the preparatory phase took place, carried out by this General Secretariat of the Synod of Bishops, together with a pre-synodal council that had been specifically appointed by the Holy Father, with the precious cooperation of the Ecclesial Pan-Amazonian Network, REPAM. Thus, an extensive consultation with the entire people of God in the Amazon took place, starting with the preparatory document with the related questionnaire, published on 8th June 2018. In this phase, the activity carried out by the REPAM was decisive in organizing as many as 260 events in the Amazon territory, of which 70 territorial assemblies, 25 thematic forums, and more than 170 other activities. It therefore can be said that overall, more than 87,000 people took part in these initiatives. No less significant was the study seminar organized in Rome by the General Secretariat from 25th to 27th February 2019 on the theme Towards the Special Synod for the Amazon, Regional and Universal Dimensions. In the preparatory phase, also the international conference held from 19th to 21st March 2019 was held in Georgetown University in Washington. And this was organized to address the topic of integral ecology as a synodal response from the Amazon region and other biomes and territories for the care of our common home. All this material was incorporated into the Instrumentum Laboris, or working document, published on 17th June 2019, which was then the foundation text of the synodal debate during the celebration of the Synod. The Synodal Assembly was marked by a choral and lively participation, rich in witnesses and proposals from the 185 Synodal Fathers. Among the participants, there was a significant presence of 25 experts and 55 auditors, including 16 representatives of different indigenous ethnic groups and original peoples, 10 religious women, presented by the International Union of Superiors General, 6 fraternal delegates, and 12 special guests, chosen because of their high scientific competence and also because they belong to international organizations and associations. The Synod lasted for 3 weeks, as you know, from 7th to 27th October 2019, during which an accurate methodology was followed, which facilitated the work. So there were phases devoted to listening during plenary sessions and also other moments of active participation in minor circles. All this great work was then channeled into the drafting of a draft final document, which, once amended by the minor circles, became the final document, voted with a large majority of over 2/3. Following the vote, according to synodal practice, the document was handed over to the Holy Father and immediately made public to the press in accordance with the Pope's wishes. During the Synod, there were some interventions by Pope Francis, who offered significant reflections for the synodal discussion. For instance, in his opening address to the Synod, the Holy Father stressed 4 dimensions: the pastoral dimension, the cultural dimension, the social dimension, and the ecological dimension, which are then somehow reflected in the final document. In fact, after an initial chapter devoted to integral conversion, it develops the theme of the new paths in 4 chapters, each devoted to a type of conversion: pastoral conversion, cultural, ecological, and synodal conversion. In his closing address, the Holy Father also took up the content that had emerged during the assembly by placing them in 4 perspectives: the cultural one, that includes inculturation and interculturality among the Amazonian people; the ecological one, according to an integral perspective denouncing the destruction of creation, of which the Amazon is one of the most important elements; and the social one, which implies not only the exploitation of creation, but also of people, together with the destruction of cultural identity. And finally, the pastoral one, the main one, since the proclamation of the gospel is urgent. But what is important is that it be heard, taken in, and understood by the different cultures on the Amazonian soil. Well, with the handing over of the final document to the Holy Father, the Synod celebration phase was concluded. The Secretariat of the Synod then waited for the Post-Synodal Apostolic Exhortation, which is being presented today. And I leave this task to my colleagues. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Your Eminence, and thank you for all your work, more than 2 years of contacts, narrations, dialogue, and for helping us with your words to delve deeper into this topic. Now, to pass on to the presentation of the document, we have a short video that was prepared by the migrant section, the Migrants and Refugee sections of the Department for Integral Human Development, which is going to illustrate our beloved Amazonia. The first to take the floor today is going to be Father Delsona Aujo dos Santos, theologian and professor of spirituality at the Pontifical Gregorian University. He participated as an expert in the Synod, and he comes from Manaus in the Amazonian region. And the floor is yours.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning to everyone. I will be speaking in Portuguese. I wish to greet Cardinal Badiseri, His Eminence, Cardinal Michael Czerny, and I wish to thank you all for the opportunity afforded me for being here. I would never have imagined that coming from so far away from the Amazon Manaus that I would be here in Rome and remain here for a few years. And I would have never imagined of commenting an apostolic exhortation of a pope who has become so poetic as Pope Francis is, when he enriched his exhortation with so many quotations, poetic quotations. And I would never have thought that I would quote Brazilian poets such as Vinicius de Moraes and other poets. From a theological standpoint, in commenting this apostolic exhortation, the first thing that is quite evident when you read this document is the title with this phrase, Querida Amazonia, our beloved Amazon, pointing at the fact that the Pope, right from the beginning of his exhortation to the peoples of the Amazon, wishes to tell these people that they are loved by him, together with all the other creatures, together with the biodiversity that exists there. And this love made him take the initiative, such as that of convening a special synod on that specific region, calling on us to take care of this vital part of this planet, of our planet, following the example of Jesus. And I quote the words of the Pope, who first takes care of us, teaches us to take care of our brothers and sisters and of the environment that he gave us every day, because those who love take care. And after that, the reader will have another surprise by the Pope. So instead of presenting conclusions or proposals for concrete actions regarding the Amazon, he prefers to share 4 dreams on his beloved Amazon. And he explains that he does not want to get back to the proposals that had already been made in the final document. And therefore, the Pope speaks about a social dream, a cultural one, an ecological dream, and an ecclesial dream. We could wonder, therefore, or question ourselves about the theological value of these dreams in this document that we are being presented. When he speaks about the dreams, if we look at the new Dictionary of Spirituality, and I am referring to the new Dictionary of Spirituality published by the Vatican in 2003, from this dictionary we read that only the author of a dream can adequately and authentically interpret the dream itself. So any effort on our part would always be limited and an approximation compared with what it really means for the author, so the dream that the author has shared with us. However, the spiritual and theological richness presented by the document cannot be fully illustrated during this limited time we have at our disposal, but it refers us to other studies, further studies that we will have to carry out from now on. And I would like to highlight that it is not the first time that Pope Francis has been using this style to communicate with his flock. Already during the first year in his pontificate, he said, I dream about a missionary choice capable of changing everything, because habits, styles, language, and all the ecclesial structure has to become a channel that is more adequate to the evangelization of the current world, rather than focusing on self-preservation. On other occasions, the Pope spoke about the value and the importance of dreaming, the act of dreaming, and not being afraid of dreaming in a different way, the Pope says. So pointing at different dreams that this world is not offering us. So dreams of generosity, of service, of purity, of strength, of forgiveness, of fidelity to one's vocation, of prayer, of fight for justice and the common good, of love for people, the poor, dreams of friendship. And our dear Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI used the same linguistic resources during his magisterium, teaching people, young people, that no dream is unattainable when those who cherish it make us cherish it. And our heart is the Spirit of God. And our Pope Francis added that Jesus can unite all the young people in the church in a single dream. And he says, a great dream, a dream that can involve everyone. And this language follows the biblical tradition that is always highlighted in dreams the fact that they represent a dream, they represent a privileged tool that God uses to reveal His will. The scriptures confirm this, as in Genesis, when Joseph, the youngest among the brothers, is informed in a dream that he would do great things, that he would do great things. Or Matthew 1:18-21, when in a dream again another Joseph, the husband of Mary, is instructed by the angel to receive Mary as his bride because she would become the mother of the Savior through the Holy Spirit. So we think that the road chosen by the Pope to write his Apostolic Exhortation is not far, but rather is closely in line with the essential sources of theology, the scriptures, the apostolic tradition, and the magisterium of the Church. And in fact, in all the dreams that he presents, there are elements, Christological elements, ecclesiological elements, that must be seen in an articulated manner, because we must pay attention to the various relations existing, because also in dreams, as often Pope Francis says in his encyclical Laudato Si, everything is connected. And in every dream shared by the Pope in this Apostolic Exhortation, we can recognize the calling to conversion that already the Synodal Fathers during the Synod formulated in drafting the final document. So that in his social dream, we see a calling to an integral conversion. In his cultural dream, we see a calling to a cultural conversion. And in his ecological dream, we are called upon to make that ecological conversion that the Synodal Fathers spoke about. And last but not least, in the ecclesial dream, there are the elements that also call us to a pastoral and synodal conversion. Thank you. Thank you, Father, for giving us a theological interpretation of the dimension of dream and of the various elements that make up this document. Now I would like to give the floor to Sister Augusta de Oliveira, Vicar General of the Servant Sisters of Mary Reparatrix, a congregation that has been in the Amazonian region for 100 years, and from there it has reached the great cities in this region. And the floor is yours. Good morning to everyone. I will begin by expressing my gratitude to Pope Francis for his courage and for his prophetic action in convening a special synod for the Amazonian region. The Synodal Assembly has convened all of us to experience conversion, a pastoral, cultural, ecological, and synodal conversion, with the approval of the final document. And today, we are given this great and precious gift, which is the Apostolic Exhortation, Post-Synodal Apostolic Exhortation, Querida Amazonia, the courage of dreaming that feeds our hopes, plans the future with proposals that are possible and can be implemented. I have to express my emotion when I read this title, Querida Amazonia, Beloved Amazon. And I confess that with this title, my heart beat faster, because this word querida has a great and unique meaning that cannot be translated. It expresses love, tenderness, knowledge, commitment, care, protection, passion, and affection in great abundance. The synodal path opened horizons and processes. Pope Francis invites us to receive this exhortation, Querida Amazonia, and to commit ourselves to implementing it in continuity with the synodal path. By referring to this image of the common home, I will consider the 4 chapters: a social dream, a cultural dream, an ecological dream, an ecclesial dream, as 4 great pillars that make up a solid foundation to continue following synodality as a stream. So we dream for and with the Amazon. We want to dream with and for the Amazon. This is a great appeal that is made in the exhortation. So dreaming with an Amazon that fights for the rights of the poorest, of the original native peoples, the Afro-descendants, the Quilombolas, the Ribeirinhos, the fishermen, the Seringueiros, the women who work, the people who live in the countrysides and in the cities. It's important to speak about the role of the laity, because an Amazonian church requires lay leadership. We must continue to create networks at the service of the life of the Amazon with the missionary and prophetic courage. And I wish to refer to some experiences, including the one of REPAM, the Pan-Amazonian network, that is very much committed to the common home, the inculturation of the gospel, and the protection of life when it generates dialogue and connection among the various church institutions in the Amazon or in favor of the Amazon. So also the missionary itinerant group made up of religious men and women in an intercongregational partnership, priests and the laity, helping to connect border realities and the most isolated communities in the further areas of the Amazon. And I would also like to highlight the great work that was carried out by the network UNGRI, a cry for life, that fights against human trafficking and sexual abuse of minors. And there are so many other groups that are carrying out work in sustainability, forest management, protection of water resources, healthcare, food processing, socio-environmental education, that are partners in our mission. In the exhortation, Pope Francis makes his considerations and proposals in connection to the strength and power that women have. And he says that many ecclesial basic ecclesial communities along the rivers, in the forests, in the villages, exist and thrive thanks to the strength, the power, the courage, the generosity of so many women who transmit faith through the catechesis of baptism in missionary groups and in the various pastoral care activities. An active presence that offers a precious contribution. Pope Francis continues his reflection, which is always open to discernment, synodal discernment, and in connection to prophetic choices. We, women, continue to actively participate in life and in the encultured mission of the Church in the Amazon, conquering and occupying spaces for decision, reflection, and service to protect life, a life that is threatened. We can see that in the most difficult areas, in the remotest border areas, we find this female presence, a religious community that animates, supports, and provides service and gives service. I thank the Lord for the path that we have followed over the years, the memory of so many lives donated by the missionaries who arrived in the Amazonian region and who committed themselves to proclaiming the gospel. They become incarnated, enculturated, they shed their blood. There are many martyrs among those who protected life on the Amazonian land, religious men and women, priests, and the laity, lay persons. As a consecrated woman, servant of Maria Reparadora, and in the name of thousands of religious women who donated and continued to give their lives in the Amazonian region and all over the world, I thank you for the opportunity given me for being here to present the great gift of the Post-Synodal Apostolic Exhortation, Querida Amazonia. So a happy coincidence, because today we remember the 15 years since the martyrdom of Sister Dorothy Stang, who was killed in Anapu, in the state of Pará in Brazil, on 12 February 2005. This represents the commitment of so many religious women in this region, to the point of giving their own lives, that the God of life may always be the reason for our being and acting. Mary, the mother of the Amazon, the beautiful prayer that has been presented by the Pope at the end of the Apostolic Exhortation. So we draw inspiration from you in order to better love, repair, and serve. Thank you. Thank you, Sister Augusta, for your witness that is so precious. Also for those who do not participate in the Synod but are called upon to listen to the Apostolic Exhortation and be guided by the Pope's words, looking for the new paths for the Church and for an integral ecology. So thank you very much for your words. Professor Carlos Nobre, scientist, Nobel Prize winner in 2007, was with us during the Synod and during the October briefings, and we thank him for being here and for his witness in the document that he's going to present, and the floor is yours.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning to everyone.
Initially, just let me thank Pope Francis for the openness and encouragement of participation of scientists for the production of the Amazon Synod, as he had done wisely in Laudato Si. As a scientist who has been working on ecological matters for more than 35 years, especially on the ecological challenges of the Amazonia region, I welcome Pope Francis' exhortation, Querida Amazonia, It's clear that both the exhortation and the final document of the Synod, to which the exhortation refers, are inspired by the encyclical Laudato Si on the care for our common home. Some bishops, such as Cardinal Pedro Barreto from Peru, have called the Synod the son of Laudato Si. The Apostolic exhortation could well be the daughter of Laudato Si. The encyclical and its children are ethical and spiritual message informed by science, but not by any science. They are all compatible with the best science research available today. In the name of the scientific community, I would like to fully endorse the socio-ecological propositions of Querida Amazonia and of its sibling, the final document of the Amazon Synod, Amazonia, New Pathways for the Church and for Integral Ecology. Let me briefly comment on some points of the exhortation which are closely related to science. Let me begin by sustainable agriculture. Pope Francis exhorts us all to seek sustainable agricultural production because the current agribusiness in the region are unsustainable. He also exhorts us to look for non-polluting energies because fossil fuel-based energy are polluting Amazonia and the entire planet. The Pope also wants us to provide decent jobs that do not compromise the dignity of the workers nor the cultural life and ecosystems. Pope Francis urges us to build up a model of development in the Amazon and in the world in which no one is left behind and in which nature is preserved. The second point is about indigenous participation and wisdom. This, of course, requires the participation of indigenous communities who are the best custodians of the forests and who can teach us how to work with care for and love for the Amazon. For example, for thousands of years, indigenous people have been practicing a sustainable mosaic type of agriculture, which preserves biodiversity, caring for species currently under threat. And that enables the restoration of the forest by, for example, the rotation of small croplands in the forest areas. Also, integrate indigenous wisdom with new technologies is something that the document refers to. This, of course, requires the One can argue that ancient indigenous wisdom is not enough to cultivate the richness of Amazonia without uprooting or weakening it. For this reason, I agree with Pope Francis when he explains that in order to care for Amazonia, we need to combine ancient indigenous wisdom with new technologies. In fact, the synodal bishops wrote in the final document of the synod, the combination of advanced science and technology with traditional local knowledge can generate an innovative bioeconomy of standing forests and flowing rivers that can replace the current deforestation-driven model of production. This would be integral ecology in action that can foster the full development of humanity. For many decades, the debate about Amazonia has been split between two opposing views. One of pure conservation to the point of ignoring the needs of local communities, the other of resource-intensive development based on the extraction of minerals, oil and gas, deforestation, hydropower, and agricultural commodities. Ironically, all this exploitation is done to feed markets outside and far away from Amazonia. The prevailing extractive model has had calamitous results, wreaking havoc on Amazonia and its people. In order to move forward and reverse this extractive, destructive model, we urgently need to embrace a third way, one that can cultivate the Amazon without destroying it, one that can work with their population without colonizing them, one that can integrate ancient indigenous cultures with new technologies. To conclude, As a scientist, I'm aware that the Amazon rainforest is like the biological heart of the earth. As we humans cannot live without a heart, the planet, at least the planet that we know, cannot live without Amazonia. But Amazonia is struggling, crying out to the point that we are close to reaching some tipping points and to mutating from being the largest rainforest of the world to a dry savanna. This will have terrible consequences for the Amazonian territory, its people, and for the rest of the world. To prevent that from happening and to respond to the cry of the Amazon and to keep the earth, her heart in good health, we need to immediately abandon the current model that destroys the forest, pollutes its river, and does not bring well-being to the people. I'm convinced that this important appeal of Pope Francis will encourage the entire Catholic Church to play its important prophetic role in the Amazon and beyond. The scientific community looks forward to seeing Pope Francis' social, cultural, pastoral, and ecological dreams come true, with the regional people being the protagonists of the new pathways. With the richness of the cultural and biological diversity of the region, the Catholic and all of Amazonians being mobilized to promote inclusiveness and sustainability. Then, new models of production that care for Amazonia can take place, and Pope Francis' dream will become a reality. Thank you, Pope Francis, for this inspiring exhortation. Thank you.
And thank you, Prophet, and words. Ascoltiamo ora un
We now are going to be seeing a video contribution by Bishop David Martinez de Aguirre. He was the Special Secretary of the Synod of the Bishops for the Pan-Amazon region. He's from the Vicariate of Puerto Maldonado. On the banks of the river, we want to also celebrate the publication of the Post-Synodal Exhortation of Pope Francis. Here in Puerto Maldonado, this great story began of the Pan-Amazonian Synod. On 10th January, the Pope told us, here, in this afternoon, the works for the Synod are going to begin. And from that day on, a process of listening began, which saw the participation of over 87,000 people from our indigenous communities, the peasants, the riverines, the cities. All together, we traced new paths for the Church and for an integral ecology. In October last year, the Pope called us to Rome, and he decided to place the Amazon at the heart of the Church, even risking to create some difficulties in his own home. I'm a witness of the enthusiasm with which many of our natives representatives arrived at the Vatican, and each and every one of them felt at home there because their desires, their concerns were heeded. Together with the bishops, the missionaries, men and women, we shared the passion for the gospel, the announcement of Christ in our difficulties, the proclamation of Christ. And today, Pope Francis, at the end of this process, gives us this exhortation, Querida Amazonia, and the title is already a reflex of what is at in the heart of the Pope, who shows a great love for this specific area and its peoples. The exhortation is a love poem devoted to the entire universal Church and to all the men and women of goodwill. It is a poem that cries for the crimes and injustices, that is surprised by the beauty of these forests and its inhabitants and their inhabitants. The Pope, once again, does not offer us a goal, a closed path, but he wants to shed light over a path that continues. That is why the exhortation, which is integrated by the post-synodal document, generates processes, and it encourages us to move forward beyond the tensions and to look for new ways for consensus to meet Christ, who invites us to dream his kingdom in the social level, at the social level, in cultures, in the ecology, and present in the Church. Thank you, Pope Francis, for the encouragement, the energy that you give us. Your exhortation, Querida Amazonia, makes us feel closer to the love of God and the Church, and it leads us to welcome the challenge of being close to the most vulnerable, and with them to take care of our planet and our common home. Thank you, Pope Francis. Thank you for your words. And I would like now to give the floor to Cardinal Michael Czerny, Undersecretary of the Migrants and Refugees Section of the Development of the Department for Integral Human Development, Special Secretary of the Synod of Bishops, who is going to illustrate the content of the exhortation.
Begins, beloved Amazon, like a love letter. At its heart is Pope Francis' love for the Amazon and its many different people, his love for the whole world and all of its people. Only what is loved can be saved. Only what is embraced can be transformed. The beloved Amazon has obviously struck Pope Francis in all its splendor, its drama and its mystery, but at the same time, its suffering and destruction to the very edge of despair. His warm, caring letter necessarily includes many a forceful denunciation of injustices and many warnings of danger, as well as urgent invitations to share his dreams and respond. In the introduction to Querida Amazonia, Pope Francis explains that he does not want to replace or repeat the Synod's final document. He prays that the entire Church be enriched and challenged by the Synod's work, that everyone in the Amazon strive to apply it, and that everyone of goodwill be inspired by it in some way. What is the status of these two documents in the body of official Church teaching? Querida Amazonia is a post-synodal exhortation. It is a magisterial document. It belongs to the Pope's authentic magisterium. New Paths for the Church and for an Integral Ecology is the final document of a special assembly of the Synod of Bishops. Like every other such synodal document, it consists of proposals which the Synod Fathers have voted to approve and have entrusted to the Holy Father. He, in turn, immediately authorized its publication with the votes cast. Now, at the beginning of Querida Amazonia, he says, I would like to officially present the final document which sets forth the conclusions of the Synod and encourages everyone to read it in full. Such official presentation and encouragement confer a certain moral authority on the final document. To ignore it would be a lack of obedience to the Holy Father's legitimate authority, while to find one or other point difficult could not be considered a lack of faith. Being a special synod that focused on the whole Amazon, it will require creative and sympathetic understanding for the lessons to be applied beyond the region. They touch the whole Church and the whole world, although not uniformly. Querida Amazonia can help guide us to a harmonious, creative, and fruitful reception of the entire synodal process. So we have two documents of two different kinds. The final document is the fruit of the synodal process, while Querida Amazonia is the Holy Father's reflections on the synodal process and its final document. The first, the final document, consisting of proposals made and voted by the Synod Fathers, has the weight of a synodal final document. The second, Querida Amazonia, reflecting on the whole process and its final document, has the authority of the ordinary magisterium of the successor of Peter. In conclusion, Pope Francis encourages everyone to advance along concrete paths that can allow the reality of the Amazon region to be transformed and set free from the evils that beset it. Thank you.
Grazie, Eminenza.
Thank you.
Of the contents of Querida Amazonia.
His Eminence, Cardinal Czerny, and Father Delson, Sister Augusta, and Professor Nobre are going to be available after, at the end of this meeting, for interviews. And another thing I would like to say before we open up for questions is that the video that we saw and the other videos that were shown at the beginning, prepared by Vatican media, are available for newspapers or journalists and whoever may be informed. This I wanted to share with you, but now I would like to give you the chance of asking questions.
Phil Pulella from Reuters. Question for Cardinal Czerny. Cardinal Mueller has already reacted to this document, calling it a document of reconciliation. And I know you don't like to see us divide the church into progressives and conservatives, but there you have it. There's a lot of stuff in the papal document, the solutions that he proposes for the shortage of priests in the Amazon, actually some of the same things that some of his conservative critics proposed, such as praying for vocations, moving priests who are already ordained into these areas. And I noticed also a very interesting footnote that there are more priests from the built-up areas of these 9 countries who prefer to go to the United States or Europe rather than to the remote areas of their own countries, and so that's a possible solution. So is this document, in your opinion, a document of reconciliation? Because, as you know better than we do, that there was the Synod was pretty contentious, particularly outside the walls.
Yeah. Well, I can say in general that if it wasn't a document of reconciliation, it wouldn't be by Pope Francis. In other words, reconciliation, misericordia, dialogue are at the heart of this papacy and are inevitably the real solutions. So I'm happy that you noticed this. I'm happy that you brought it forward, and I can only affirm that, yes, this is reconciling, this is challenging, and this is stimulating, and as I said, in different ways, in different places. And we really look forward to very good consequences of the people in the Amazon making this their own, but also people outside it.
Bene. Chris, prego.
From the Catholic Herald. Cardinal Czerny, sorry about this, but you brought it up. Authentic magisterium, right? Could you be more specific?
Yes, I can say it belongs to the ordinary magisterium.
Okay. Anybody mind if I follow up? Humani Generis participates in that too, right? Magisterium is distinguished by the object, by the level of authority at which it is taught, and by the intention of the teacher. So can you speak to that, please? I'm thinking, by the way, and I don't want to make a speech, but, you know, there is a lot of science, or at least a lot of sociology, science, hard sciences, etc. What happens when the scientific consensus shifts, right? And tells us that things are actually much worse than they are, or that the causes are understood better and what we thought earlier no longer is. Just saying, well, this is authentic magisterium, and believing this, is something to which we're bound, well, the object at that point is not a proper object of faith, is it? So what is, can you get into this?
The proper object is finally to the following of Jesus Christ and the living out of the gospel. And obviously, in our living out of the gospel, we adapt to the changing circumstances of our world. So I think the authority of Querida Amazonia is, as I've said, is part of the ordinary magisterium of the successor of Peter, and we are happy to embrace it as such, and we are applying it to our changing and troubled world. And we're doing that with all the gifts that God gave us, including our intelligence, our emotions, our will, our commitment. And I think that therefore we are not doubtful about the gift that we have received from Pope Francis in this document. Thanks.
Forse si può anche dire.
Perhaps we could also say, and I just add a word, all the social encyclicals since the time of Leo XIII had to do with historical situations, the historical situation of that time in which they were written, and this is also the case with the documents that are produced today.
Buongiorno, sono Elisa con Crux.
Good morning. Elisa, I would like to ask something about what the Pope said concerning liturgy and the need for including more elements from the native traditions, so their way of expressing themselves in liturgy. And there is a note that refers to a proposal made during the Synod concerning an Amazonian rite in connection to liturgy. I wanted to ask if this is an opening or an encouragement of the Pope in this direction. Your Eminence, or... Yes, there is a reference to the Amazonian rite in note 102, if I'm not mistaken. And as usual, it is a procedure, as in other cases, and I refer to the Congolian rite. So before Christmas, there was a Mass in the Basilica of St. Peter's with the Congolese community. As in the case, the rites come with a bottom-up approach. It's proposed by the local church within the context of a standardized procedure that is utilized in these cases. And in this case, too, evidently in the note, there is reference to this type of procedure.
Merticelli, prego.
Merticelli, Dom Total, Brasil. Faccio la domanda in portoghese.
I'm going to ask the question in Portuguese. The Pope was accused in Brazil by many groups of taking care of, considering themes that are not within his remit, and he was very much persecuted because of this, because according to some groups, this would be the task of the national governments in the Amazonian region. Ask your comment on this, that of Father Adelson. And the second is that the Pope didn't say much about married ordained men as a strategic move. Thank you for your question. It is an opportunity. We as Christians and non-Christians, we are informed about the fact that within the context of the mission of the Church, the Holy Father and all of us as Christians, we should take care of the reality around us, including the social, political, economic context. And so also the ecological context is included. It is true, as you said, that some groups, some people, according to some groups of people, there is no such understanding, also because they have no knowledge of the documents of the Church and of theology. But if we look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, already there you see clear proof that there is reference to the role of the Church in the economics. In the Catechism of the Holy Church, of the Catholic Church, number 2047, it is said that everything that concerns the economy should consider respecting human dignity, so it requires justice, it must consider solidarity, and as an example, it refers to the figure of Jesus Christ himself, because who became poor to help us understand through his poverty. So this is in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So what the Holy Father does is being faithful to the magisterium of the Church that invites us to be Christians who also have an ethical position in the world. So our faith is not a disincarnated faith, and the encyclical Laudato Si is already is recorded by the Pope, and it refers to a situation of injustice and imbalance existing in the world, and very often caused by our own actions and policies that are wrong, that bring damage not just to a region such as that of the Amazon, as we are seeing, and Professor Nobre is the most authoritative person we have here who can witness this. For instance, think about the effects on climate, the destruction that of a forest causes all over the world. So this position by the Pope is within the tradition. So he's not the first Pope to speak about ecological issues, who expresses his solidarity explicitly to the native peoples. The Holy Father, John Paul II, the 2 times he was in Brazil, met with indigenous leaders, and he supported them in fighting for their rights, in the fight to protect their own culture. Our Pope Emeritus, Benedict XVI, when he was in Brazil in 2007, did the same. So I would say that the Pope decided to focus attention on this, not focus just on one aspect of the final document. Thank you.
Of course, be run by the Congregation for Divine Worship, in questi casi, culto divino. Va bene? C'è Andrea Gagliarducci laggiù. Prego.
Andrea Gagliarducci, good morning. An information, why this exhortation was signed in St. John the Lateran and not in the Vatican? Well, as in other cases, some cases, the Pope signed some documents in San Giovanni Laterano when they have a pastoral content. So this is an explanation. Sandro Magister, Settimo Cielo. In the exhortation, there are no words concerning the ordination of married men, but in the final document of the Synod, yes, there are words. I would like to ask Cardinal Czerny, you highlighted in the initial part of the exhortation that there is sort of the inclusion of the final document in a sort of magisterium. So this means that from that final document, a bishops' conference can make decisions on the topic of the ordination of married men.
The final document is included in the Holy Father's magisterium. I said that the Holy Father presents the final document to us with his exhortation, and that therefore, and he encourages us, encourages everyone to read the whole document. So the particular proposals, which are of many different kinds, very different levels, many different scopes, and even of different kinds of importance, remain on the table as proposals made by the Synod, which he encourages the Church in the Amazon the church everywhere and people of goodwill to read and to appreciate and to benefit from, apply in proportion to the reality in which they find themselves.
Quindi, l'esortazione apostolica magistero.
Apostolic Exhortation Magisterium. The final document is not magisterium. The synod, however, was not an exchange on celibacy, even though it is a topic that was considered. The topic of celibacy or permanent deacons or ordained deacons was a response to a pastoral need. So the Pope understood this need and he responded with 3 words in particular that are in point 90 of the exhortation that some of you also quoted. I think Phil Pulella when he made his question, so when he was speaking about prayer, generosity and formation. And however, I wish to add something because since we made a communication a few days ago or some time ago, the position of the Pope on celibacy is known.
International. Io voglio tornare a...
I would like to get back to this topic of the ordinary magisterium because in 2018 the Pope promulgated an apostolic constitution called Episcopalis Communio. In Article 18 it says, receiving the approval of the document, the final document of the Assembly is offered to the Roman Pontiff, who decides about its publication. If it approved expressly by the Pontiff, the final document participates in the ordinary magisterium of the successor of Peter. You said the opposite today. Here I would like to perhaps ask Cardinal Baldisseri, who knows everything about synodal procedures. You read the text, and it's evident in the sense that it's not so ambiguous. If approved expressly by the Roman Pontiff, the final document participates in the ordinary magisterium. The Apostolic Exhortation does not speak about the approval of the final document. It speaks about presentation, but not approval. So it invites us to read it. It says they will not repeat. It doesn't want to replace. But it says, it doesn't quote it. So the conclusion is what was already expressed by Cardinal Czerny. There are no clear canonical words meaning approval, as Article 18 said, the article you quoted. So that speaks about expressed approval, not indirect or just thought approval. Cardinal Czerny also said that it has a certain moral authority. Document has a certain moral authority, but does not have a magisterial authority. Thank you.
Jason Horowitz.
Hi, Jason Horowitz of the New York Times. I beg forgiveness, I just don't understand something. So the final document, which you're saying has a moral authority, but there are certain things that should be taken and certain proposals can be applied, but if I'm understanding correctly, but obviously I'm guessing that the issue of ordination of married priests cannot be applied without the Pope's approval, right? I mean, they can't just decide to do that, so it's a rejection, it seems.
Prego, Padre Delson, se vuole dire una parola.
Father Delson. So to clarify, something that we must bear in mind is that the Pope always invites us to carry out, to follow a pathway of synodal dialogue. He wants to involve the entire Church in this process. The Synod was this process that, however, does not end with the Synod, and it doesn't even end with the Apostolical Exhortation. So his is an invitation when in number 4 he says, in his exhortation, he says he hopes that the entire Church, and so pastors, consecrated men and women, lay faithful, strive to apply it. So what the final document proposed in its 120 items, obviously the Pope cannot say that, well, he could, but we cannot here say what was not said. We can only speak about what was said, but invites us to think how from now on we can refer to each of these elements, all within the framework of their own vocational status, within the context of their activity within the Church, within their territorial area where they live. And he thinks that there are some things in these 120 points that belong to the Pope in terms of decision, whereas other things we can apply in our communities, the bishops in their diocese, the bishops' conferences in that country, and every baptized person in his or her personal life. So this, we have to understand what we can apply in my life, in my parish, church, in my diocese. There are some things that we can apply directly, but as the Pope, he has the right to decide about the things that belong to the Pope in terms of being decided about. That is why I see his proposal as meaning that invites us to look at the entire synodal path and continue with discernment in a church that is called upon to make this, to walk along this pathway of dialogue and discernment, as he says in number 2 in his exhortation.
Just
Could you clarify that for us?
Jason, I'll add something in English. Now, on the issue of the synod was on evangelization. There were some issues concerning how this could be carried out. Some proposals were made. Not all of them were picked up in the Apostolic Exhortation. Now, the final document is a precious document. It is authoritative. Its authority derives from the Synod of the Bishops. Pope Francis recognizes this role to it, to the point that he presents it officially. And he does ask us to read it. But it does not become magisterium, okay? And anything in the final document should be read through the lens of the Apostolic Exhortation. That is the lens to read the final document of the Synod. Even the application or the implementation requested in point 4 concerns pastors, consecrated men and women, faithful lay people. And even that application or implementation should be done in the light of the exhortation itself. Now, concerning pastors, which mean priests, consecrated men and women, faithful and lay people, each according to their competence or each according to what they are in the Church, the Pope has done his own application with the Apostolic Exhortation. Is it clearer? Jason. Grazie. Qui? Ann Thompson, NBC. I'm doing introductions today.
Thank you, Matteo.
Prego.
To the cardinals, I would just ask for a little clarity on this. First of all, does this mean that the Pope has closed the door on the issue of married priests and women deacons, and specifically for Cardinal Baldisseri, is this a disappointment for the Latin American bishops?
Well, I think that Cardinal Czerny answers. He is he's an expert on these topics.
I think the best way to understand this is as part of a process and part of a journey. That's why it's called the Synod. And we are at a certain point in this, at a very important point in the synodal process, and there's long roads ahead as well as roads already traveled. And so the questions that you are returning to are questions on the road. And the Holy Father has not resolved them in any way beyond what he has said in the exhortation. So if there are questions that you feel are open or that the Church feels are open, thanks to the exhortation, they will continue to be debated, discussed, discerned, prayed over, and when mature, presented to the appropriate authority for decision. They're decisions, as Father Adelson said, they're decisions that can be made in a diocese, in a conference, and they're decisions that are made here. So I think if you're looking for a kind of closure so that you can end your article with a punch, I'm afraid there isn't that kind of closure.
Marco Politi, prego.
Marco Politi. A question for Cardinal Baldisseri on the concreteness of the synodal process. Paragraph 111 is not the fruit of the pressure of the public opinion or the mass media, but of a long process that you described right from the beginning. So the Holy Father identified as a general rapporteur Cardinal Umes, whose ideas were known to everyone, and the Holy Father authorized the Instrumentum Laboris that was then presented at the Assembly, that was touched on the points, aspects that were voted with a two-thirds majority of paragraph 111. My question is on this. After all this process, which was approved and encouraged by the Holy Father during the various stages, it is understandable that the Holy Father doesn't say anything about this paragraph that was voted by the bishops. Thank you. The Holy Father didn't say anything specific concerning any item in the final document. He said, I'm not quoting it. So he did not quote this topic either. And on the contrary, I think he did say what were the steps to be taken, what are the steps to be taken. And they are of exhorting bishops to promote vocations. Secondly, asking bishops to be generous so that they send priests, missionary priests to the Amazon. Third, formation, continuing permanent formation, ongoing formation, priestly ongoing formation that has to be adapted or has to be appropriate for every region. Obviously, this also is very much related to the topic of enculturation, and it is also related to the topic of liturgy, So he didn't speak about an Amazonian right. And then he spoke about leadership. So what is important is the leadership by lay people, and priests have to take responsibility in this context. I think that he has expanded the horizon, which is particularly appropriate for the Amazon, and it stops there. I would like to say that the Synod is a process, as he always says. Time is greater than space. This he repeated. This means that the Holy Father has come to this conclusion in point 1.111 and other important ones. He considered them to be part of a process, of a synodal process. So I would like to say that the field is open and that we continue to walk. I think that in connection to this topic of the Church as walking, we can conclude this press conference. Of course, you can then have a conversation with today's speakers. I wish to thank you for being here, for your patience, and we will see you again on other occasions. Thank you.
A peace-loving nation founded on Catholic values. A nation built upon the faith of North American martyrs. Together with the Catholic Church, let's restore our values. Bring the abundance of life back to Canada. From conception to natural death. Shalom World joined hands with the Church, spreading the good news across Canada. From the shores of Newfoundland